In the early days of the internet, radical libertarians were scattered, lonely, and faceless. Without direction, they resigned to scour the web, sifting through content providers in a wasteland plagued by YouTube demonetization, Facebook jail, and covert internet censorship. But then, in 2017, the Libertarian Union was formed. Finally, the average Joe libertarian could find a thriving community of independent podcasters and content providers, all in one convenient location. At Libertarian Union, we'll always have the latest news, interviews, discussions, and even movie reviews. With hundreds of episodes and more added all the time, you'll always find something fresh at libertarianunion.com.
All right. Let's get fired up here.
Maximum freedom. Read.
Stay on target.
Maximum freedom.
Stay on target.
Maximum freedom. Read Rothbard.
Well, hello and welcome to the Actual Anarchy podcast where we talk about movies from a Rothbardian and Anarcho-Capitalist perspective. Tonight, we're going to have a special guest, and we'll introduce him in just a moment when we get to the Last Nighters portion of the show. But before we do that, I wanted to let you know that we're going to talk about Smallfoot, the computer-animated movie about Yetis that's meant for kids, but has like a really strong message that is the impetus for the show. So this will be a fun discussion, and it will be episode 112 of the podcast. You can find the show notes and more at actualanarchy.com/112. Say hello to Robert real quick before we go to that Last Nighters portion of the show.
Hey, babies. What's happening, everybody? Glad to be here. Thank you for having me on the show, Daniel.
Hey, you're welcome. And I don't know if I mentioned this on the Last Nighters portion a while back or the Actual Anarchy portion, so I'll just say it now. I finally got my Windows 10 machine working again.
Yes.
So I am super impressed with myself. It's almost accidental how I solved it. I was doing stuff that I had no idea how to fix. I was watching videos and reading articles on how to fix and all of these things, and everything was telling me that I'm going to have to like get a new boot drive or a new install of the OS and lose all of my files and everything. And I almost gave up. It was like 3 weeks of this, and I finally dedicated some time, spent way too much time on it. But I ended up in the boot drive area on the, emergency screen or whatever the hell you can get into by hitting F8 like 50 times. I just had it redirect to a new boot file, and it worked.
Look at you.
Yeah, and none of the articles,
You're
none of
not
the
an old
videos,
man.
none of the articles, none of them said to do this. I just did it accidentally because I accidentally deleted something. I was like, oh God, I hope I didn't destroy this thing. Anyway, it works now, and that's why I'm on the camera and everything's looking solid. It's got the little blurry effect on the our chroma cam because they upgraded that with new artificial intelligence to make it find more human objects. Anyway, I don't know why I'm telling everyone this. This should all be bonus content for our Patreon supporters, who, by the way, do get bonus content even better than this. And you can support us at Patreon at actualanarchy.com/Patreon. But let's move on to the Last Nighters portion of the show, shall we? Hey everyone, it's Daniel Elwood and Robert Johnson, the Last Nighters, and we're going to talk about Smallfoot tonight with a special guest, Rocky Ferrenburg of the Noisemaker podcast and also other famous things. But before we get to him, I want to mention that we are part of the Launchpad Media, and so you can find this show and many more at thelaunchpadmedia.com, where they're always launching new ideas in your direction. This is episode 55 of the show. You can find the show notes more at lastnighters.com/55. Hello, Robert, and then let's introduce Rocky. Ask him about, here, you ask him to describe himself after you say how you are.
Oh. Well, I'm a little bit sore, but I'm excited to be here. I don't really have to do anything but sit in this chair and flap my gums. So, hey, Rocky, how's it going, man?
Very short introduction. Well, everything's going great over here. Getting ready. This is my technically my Sunday, so I get to get back to work at about 3 o'clock in the morning. So hitting the grind, trying to make that money, and taking care of business. This 5 on 3 off schedule I just started this year is it's nice and horrible all at the same time.
You cram What? How many
Say
hours
what?
into 5 days?
In a 5-day period, I typically do be somewhere around 60, 70 hours. So, and then I also go to school full time, getting ready to graduate. I actually got 5 associate's degrees from the community college here, 2 more bachelor's degrees from Washington State this year, and also run the podcast, Noisemaker Podcast. I blog a little bit about recovery. Then I also write for Think Liberty, and got a couple articles posted on being libertarian. Also had some stuff published with the Rouser and, a number of other stuff. So write for a local music magazine, also play in a local band, father, there's some more things probably somewhere in there.
What do you do in your ample free time?
Right.
Yeah, that's a lot of hats there, Rocky.
I know.
Where can our audience find you? Do you have a website? It's rockyferrenburg.com. Is that right?
Yeah, Rocky Ferrenburg, F as in Frank, ERREN, B as in boy, URG. And I try to consolidate as much of my stuff right there into one place. So.
All right. And how long have you been at school? It sounds like that many degrees. It's probably at least 8 years. And to quote Tommy Boy, I think they're called doctors.
Yeah, I've been there. I've been in college for about 7 years. Yeah. I mean, it's been all right. It's boxes to check. A lot of stuff is a lot of, I argue with a lot of my professors. I spend a lot of time. What I've come to realize is that I use a lot of the discussion board areas to present libertarian ideas. So a lot of my degrees and a lot of my classes are in the criminal justice field and in the political science field. So in there, I talk about a lot of, basically minimizing the size of government, and I counteract a lot of people's ideas that they have about the state. I spend a lot of time in the discussion boards, not arguing. I usually argue with the professors, but I try to present information to the other students in the class that might possibly give them an alternative viewpoint that they're not going to hear from a lot of other people. And I get a lot of people that resonate to me and follow my discussion boards quite a bit. So I think I'd like to think there's been some kind of change affected in that realm,
Right. Yeah. And that's smart. That sounds a lot like, I don't do this as much. And I always say that I'm trying to cut back, and I actually have cut back at this point, but getting into Facebook debates with people, you never really convince your adversary or whoever you're debating with, but it's always there for the audience, the other people who kind of watch along. And sometimes it's helpful. I actually got a bunch of friend requests as a result of other people seeing me make points against some statist argument. And they're like, oh yeah, that guy was totally crazy and all that. But anyway, this is ostensibly a show about movies, so we should probably get into it on Smallfoot. And we usually start out with the Google description. So if you guys are ready, I can go ahead and do that.
Let's do it.
All right. Smallfoot came out 2018. It's a fantasy/musical, 1 hour, 49 minutes. 6.7 on the IMDb, 76% Rotten Tomatoes, and 4.4 out of 5 on the old Facebook. And 92% of the Google users like it. Here's the description. Migo is a friendly Yeti whose world gets turned upside down when he discovers something that he didn't know existed, a human. He soon faces banishment from his snowy home when the rest of the villagers refuse to believe his fantastic tale. Hoping to prove them wrong, Migo embarks on an epic journey to find the mysterious creature that can put him back in the good graces of with his simple community. The director was Carrie Kirkpatrick. Came out just September 28th of last year. Box office of $214 million on a budget of $80 million, starring the likes of Channing Tatum, LeBron James, Danny DeVito, Common, and a few other folks. And I'm sure that we're going to upset some people because I did not mention any women. But anyway, Robert, your take on the Google description, and then let's go to Rocky with your take and also why you suggested this movie to us. So Robert first.
Well, how about that? I didn't know that Facebook was a new aggregate of movie opinion. I assume there's some kind of centralized thing where they go in and vote on movies. And then Google's pulling that. Okay. So yeah, the movie I saw it in the theater originally, and it struck me by how mature the storyline was. I'm sure that there are other, animated films like Up, or say some other kind of, Wall-E, I suppose, or maybe some other kind of high-minded stuff. Well, not necessarily high-minded, but you know what I mean? Like, it's not just some kid's movie. Like, it is, but it's got more to it than that. And then, so that's what kind of struck me about this whole thing. I think it's really interesting that it has some kind of libertarian / kind of anarcho kind of ideas in the way that they police their society. Sort of. I mean, I think we'll probably talk about that a little bit. It's not really clear in the movie, but they use ostracism as the main means of controlling the population, which is really exciting to me. So, but anyway, I want to hear Rocky's thoughts on why he thought that this was a good movie to talk about. I agree with him, but I want to hear what you have to say, sir.
Well, I started watching this movie with my daughters. They were really interested in watching this movie, and so we sat down to watch it as a family. And once again, get into it a little bit more, but the whole idea on the stones and the methodology that they go about trying to protect their community, I found that to be really interesting, and almost like a subliminal level of telling kids that we have to abide by specific rules that these higher ups dictate to us, despite the fact that everything changes in the end. I mean, with Disney movies and these animated movies, I mean, everything turns out good and everybody's happy in the end, and there's always that the happily ever after thing. But yeah, just the whole idea of we have this list of rules, and you must abide by these list of rules, and you can't question them. I thought that was once again a pretty deep topic to put into a kids movie.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. It really was this, this idea of this noble lie that they, and I'm just going to go ahead and spoil it all right now, but the rune keeper, I guess, the stone keeper, I guess they call him, has essentially invented all these laws that have the villagers all maintaining and working towards their own deception, towards their own ignorance of the state of the world. And they have to obey with blind obedience, and it's all for their own, essentially, protection. And is it ever okay to lie for for this noble idea of keeping everybody safe? It's almost an idea of an argument for the CIA and how all they do is lie, but they're supposedly lying to protect everybody. So I want to get Daniel's thoughts on things. I want to get into all this, but I thought this is a really kind of rich topic of discussion from just this kind of simple animated movie.
Yeah, I think it is interesting because the intention behind the lie is that there's a danger out there that has presented itself, and so he needs a way to get people to, or the other characters, I'm going to call them people, refer to them, they're basically civilization here. They might identify as people. So they kind of need to have some, he's basically babying them, like how, Rocky, you've got kids, I've got kids. You need to protect them until they're fully capable of making decisions on their own. Unfortunately, in this scenario, he's doing this to fully grown adults within this society that they live in. And so I think that by the resolution at the end, where he basically reveals what the danger actually is and allows them to choose for themselves what they want to do about it, is a good resolution. And so I'm going to argue against the noble lie here because it allows him to basically centrally plan their community, regiment their days, what their jobs are going to be, when they wake up. And it's all mixed in this religious type of cover, that gives him legitimacy or authority. And so I think that that's trying to make the civilization basically be automatons. They're not individuals in how they can be in their lives. I mean, of course, they still have their own distinct personalities in the movie, but it's not something that I think they're really living their lives to the fullest until the end, when the facade falls away and they realize what is the supposed danger, and then they can choose for themselves what to do about it.
Yeah, I find it hard to argue against that. That's essentially my take on it. But I do want to ask you about, and I want to, if Rocky's got any more further thoughts on this, I don't want to cut him off. But I do want to ask you about how you felt, because, in my ideal society, ostracism and societal pressures would function to maintain cohesion and balance and, a sense of peace and normalcy.
Well, I actually want to interject here, because one thing that you were talking about with ostracism, I enjoy that idea too. And just a quick blurb, the ostracism, though, didn't come from the community, the Yeti community there. It actually came from the stone keeper, which even the first stone in the movie says to not question the stone keeper. So therefore you have this dictatorial leader that you cannot contradict. And he's the one that ostracized Migo in the movie. It wasn't the community. In fact, whenever you watch the movie, the other Yetis there kind of look onward to him as in why, we don't want him to be gone, And so I think that what you're talking about is correct, but I think where the ostracism came from in the movie is more nefarious than what you're getting at.
Right, and it just shows how effective it is. It's so good that even the statist is going to use it.
Yeah, so I completely agree with you. I want to equally further point out that, Migo's crime was essentially blasphemy. He wasn't, he was contradicting what some made-up law was, where the law contradicted reality. And he said, oh, no, this is reality. And so even though it is ostracism, it's for this really messed up reason.
Yeah,
but,
and in fact, they gaslight him in the process.
Sorry, what, Daniel?
They gaslight him in the process. They make him think he's crazy.
Yes, they do.
So to not believe his own eyes.
Right, absolutely they do. But are they still in the right? Like if the entire village all agrees, hey, we don't want to hang out with you for this specific reason, for this charge of blasphemy, even though you're totally in the right, but we don't care about that. Are they still in the right for ostracizing him?
Well, in a real world example, let's look at something. I mean, an argument that I see all the time is, if somebody is a racist barber, then it would be in a more libertarian or anarcho society, it would be the job of the community to no longer purchase this barber's services, therefore running him out of business, pushing him out of the community. So I guess the flip side of that, it would be if you have a racist barber and everybody likes that racist barber, is it okay to keep that barber and push other people of whatever the race may be? If it was Chinese, push all the Chinese people out of that town. If it's if everybody agrees to it, is it okay for a whole town to be racist?
Right. Is it okay? I think if everybody has the preference of having a non-Chinese barber, then that's perfectly fine. Who are we to judge somebody else's in-group preferences? As long as you're doing it voluntarily. If I want to go and live in a community with only Inuit Eskimos, and they go, no, I'm sorry, we don't want any white people here. Are they in the wrong? I don't know. If there's somebody that's voluntarily going to sell me a piece of property there, but if, I guess it comes down to force, of course, right? If they're actually forcing Migo out of the village, because I don't think they actually do. They just tell him you're not welcome here anymore. You're banished. They just tell him that. They don't actually physically assault him and throw him out.
No, the other guy, the kind of dopey hipster guy who rides the Stonekeeper's son, he kind of blocks him from coming in, but there's no physical altercation.
Right.
But
yeah,
there's sort of that underlying threat, though.
Yeah, although what they would really do, it's hard to say, but they do kind of say, and it is in the very beginning of the movie, they do say that the laws are written in stone and enforced by the Stonekeeper, although exactly what enforced means by the Stonekeeper more seems to be social shaming than him grabbing a club and beating somebody up.
Right. Yeah. Now I wanted to get back to the automaton kind of point I was making in the opening here, because I wrote in my notes that essentially what they're trying to have here is what in economics we would call an evenly rotating economy, which is really just a construct of the mind so that you can sort of work out what might happen if certain factors were to change in that. But essentially, you'd end up with no progress and no change. Everything would be consistent and the same, and it would be a very high time preference society. There'd be no reason to save for the future or to accumulate capital or to innovate or do anything to progress. So you would have no elongation of the structure of production. You'd have no increased efficiency in your ability to produce goods. And so you would have a stagnant society that would stay at a primitive level. And that is, of course, what a lot of socialists don't realize what they're advocating for, but that's where it would end up.
Yeah, and the movie kind of presents that, right? Even though they're on a mountaintop and whatever, we don't know how old this society is. They have this kind of fancy machinery underneath, but above ground, they're basically living in caves.
Well, also what a lot of that is that all the innovation, all the creativity obviously has come from the stone keepers to, have this set up in a way that they fuel the myth themselves. I think somebody else said something about that a little earlier. The whole setup, everybody's job, though it's menial, builds into fueling that lie. The one big question that I had about, especially that underground area where they were, turning the ice into steam to kind of separate the Yetis and the people. I want to know that if nobody knew about it, who built all that stuff underneath the mountain? because they had to keep it all a secret. So who built all that? I mean, that was obviously, there's no answer to that question, but I found that kind of maybe a plot hole in the story.
Yeah, it kind of implies that there were stone keepers. They were like over the hundreds and thousands of years, just digging away at it, building it slowly. But they would have had to all built it all at one time, right? Because you have to have the clouds to block off the view of the rest of the world. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it would have to be an intergenerational thing where, I mean, the whole impetus for the concealment of their society was that when they did interact with humans before, they were hunted and there was violence and altercations. And so that society, that generation of the Yetis all experienced that. And those that survived must have created this artificial structure, this religious and intellectual mysticism to maintain this facade. And then future generations, new members of the society being born into it would have been trained, indoctrinated in their government school. It
really reminded me of The Village.
Yeah.
Do you remember that movie?
Sure.
It really reminded me of The Village. So I kind of had that theme running through. I mean, obviously it's completely different as well, but yeah, having that isolated lie, anyways, I just thought that was worth mentioning.
Right. And then it also, gave the Stonekeeper like this noble cause in his own head, that he was doing something for the people, even by doing evil things. And Robert and I, we've talked about this before, but even the worst tyrants in history all thought they were doing something good. They weren't like, oh, how nefarious can I be? They were trying to accomplish something, and they thought they were doing good for their country or their people or whatever. And, it just turns out that monstrous things were happening as a result of them trying to achieve their goals. And I've got a really somewhat lengthy Murray Rothbard quote that I think is relevant here. So if you guys will indulge me for a moment.
Sure.
All right. This is Rothbard. One of the crucial factors that permits governments to do the monstrous things they habitually do is the sense of legitimacy on the part of the stupefied public. The average citizen may not like, in fact, may even strongly object to the policies and exactions of his government, but he has been imbued with the idea, carefully indoctrinated by centuries of government propaganda, that the government is his legitimate sovereign and that it would be wicked or mad to refuse to obey its dictates. It is this sense of legitimacy that the state's intellectuals have fostered over the ages, aided and abetted by all the trappings of legitimacy, flags, rituals, ceremonies, awards, constitutions, etc. And in the pre-show, Rocky, we were talking about your visit to Mount Rushmore, and that ties right into this. So anyway, I thought that quote was really relevant when I ran into it. I had to throw it into my notes, and I don't know. What are you guys' thoughts, Robert?
Well, I don't know about that quote too much. I mean, Rothbard said some great things, of course. But I was just off in my own head thinking about just the way that this movie, how we always say that government is a religion and the state is essentially, the figureheads, and they're like the priest class and that sort of thing. In this movie, like the government is definitely the priest class, and they're kind of one and the same. And everybody looks to this one priest person as the kind of like ruler of society. Although, one without necessarily like overt violence where the state is. And I don't know if I wouldn't prefer that. I think I would prefer that. Like, how Jordan Peterson says, you take away Christianity, if you dump, religion, what fills the gap? What fills that hole in society? And it's almost always government. And man, I think I'd prefer like this noble lie than, at least if it's in that sense. Even though it is, they're all treating us like children. All of them do. Government does, the priests do. Everybody treats us like children, as if they have some kind of specialized knowledge or specialized ability that only they have, or for some noble purpose that we just can't see or whatever. They feel the desire or the need to rule over us through some noble purpose or whatever reason. I don't know. What would you prefer, Daniel? I mean, I'd prefer, obviously, a private property-based, free society, but...
Well, are you basically saying, like, having the religion and the government kind of intertwined, or having a separation between the two? Which would I prefer?
Well, at least
shit sandwich or poop sandwich?
At least this one doesn't, like, pretend to not be. You know what I mean? Like, he's openly, like, a priest. He's coming up with these godly laws straight from his own mind or whatever, but at least he's not, forcing anybody to do anything.
So are you saying perhaps it's more of the king argument that we were having in The Outlaw King when we had the Anarcho-Viking on? He was talking about the Hans Hermann Hoppe, like between a monarchy and a democracy, monarchy would have preferential outcomes due to the factors of wanting to maintain the capital stock of the kingdom and not looting it for just a period of years before they're out and those types of things.
Right. I mean, so in this movie, they're essentially isolationists, right? They're like Japan pre-Meiji era, like they're like serious Trump border wall people. They have this cloud which not only protects them from the humans and the humans from them, but
that's like the modern media, by the way.
Yeah, so at the very end, they go down the mountain, like all of them, and they meet up with the humans. And we're led to believe that this is going to lead to an exchange of ideas and blah blah blah, and like peaceful coexistence, that sort of thing. And I don't know if they wouldn't be better off, staying up on the mountain. I don't know.
Well, the one thing it doesn't say,
government, the human government. That's not going to be used.
Well, the one thing they don't say in there, it doesn't actually say if the Stonekeeper enacted any type of force on the Yetis to make them all come down. It seemed like it was assumed that, given new information, that all the Yetis were willing to come down and try to coexist with the people. And then what was also interesting about that exchange at the very end, which was really brief, is that you almost had like the state come up and try to enforce a barrier between the citizens of the humans and the Yetis. And it was the people that went between the government, the state, in order to, reach back out to the Yetis. And I thought that exchange was really unique and really different, because it wasn't necessarily like the government coming to them or anything. It was this group of people that, basically broke through this human shield that they had up at that point. So, but if the Stonekeeper enacted force in order to bring them down there, telling them that they had to go down there to, meet these people, then yeah, force would be enacted. But if it was voluntary, I don't necessarily see 100% of a problem with that.
Yeah, I don't see a problem with it from the sense of the Stonekeeper, but I just have to worry about these people living in an essentially voluntary society now interacting with humans. And, we humans don't have a great track record with, like the movie depicts, with this kind of cryptozoological creatures, or, big creatures in general. We would put things like that in a zoo.
Yeah.
We put gorillas and chimpanzees, which are super smart animals. We lock them in cages. And I'm not necessarily totally against it as a libertarian. I mean, it's a human philosophy, not necessarily an animal philosophy, but I've argued many times about the sentience of other creatures. If we don't treat them with, respect, then what gives them the right to, why should we expect that kind of treatment from any other sentient creatures to us? So I would think it would turn out badly for the Yetis. I think that these things would be, kind of King Konged, and maybe even locked up and put in cages and put on shows, and people declare them their property. I foresee bad things happening to these poor Yetis.
Human ravages by the human savages. I should do that in a sing-songy voice, because there are a lot of songs in this one.
Well, the thing that I'm curious about is it seems like there's a lot of support for the Yeti community coming from you, Robert. And so my question is that if no, seriously. So the other question is, they went to take the human away. And what was the quote? They told, the Stonekeeper told Migo that he did a good thing and that he did his job whenever he basically went back out and lied to the Yetis to keep this lie. But then they took the human that was dying away in a little cage. And the Stonekeeper's daughter is the one that took him and took him back down to the world. But my question is, what were they going to do with this human? Because it didn't seem like they were going to return him to his home. It doesn't seem like they were a very civilized community either. It seems like they would kill this human, because it was just a yak. They would kill this human in order to maintain this noble lie. So once again, how much do we violate other people's rights or other animals' rights, other creatures' lives in order to, keep the secret? When does it not become noble at that point?
Yeah, all the more reason to stay separate. I mean, having watched the movie, at the end, I was like, yeah, two people coming together, these people are smart and we're going to find common ground and all that. But this is an interesting discussion. This is reaching the limits of my brain power in terms of exactly how I feel about all this.
Well, can I throw something at you, Robert?
Yeah, go ahead, Daniel.
All right. Well, I think that I would rather have the awareness of what the dangers are in the world. Like, I want my kids to know to not go down that dark alley, or to go to that rough neighborhood, or to go to some, war-torn country. I want them to be aware of it rather than just shield them from it. Like, even
what are you arguing for?
I'm arguing that this Yeti society should not have the lie, but should have the information abundantly available. And
so the Stonekeepers should have kept the village informed of the humans and the danger thereof.
Well, whatever would have happened, in the market, like it would have been a known thing that, hey, humans typically have been dangerous for us. So let's make the Yetis learn from our experience here, and they can make their own decisions.
Okay. I agree with you to a certain extent. However, this is a kind of a unique scenario because you're dealing with Yetis and not humans. So if they were humans and they're like, okay, we all understand the dangers of going out into the wider world and whatnot, there's not a huge, massive amount of curiosity that's going to come pouring in from the world to this human little enclave. But if it's Yetis and one Yeti leaves, all of a sudden humans go, holy shit, Yetis are real. Everybody, check this shit out. It's blowing up on YouTube. It's blowing up on social media. Holy fucking balls. My brain is melting right now. They're real. We are going there tomorrow. Me and a billion other people are going to this little shit splat town in the middle of nowhere fucking place, and we're showing up on the front door of Yeti Central, and what do you think's going to happen? I don't know, man. Sounds like a bad news for the Yeti.
Yeah, that's what that Percy character was actually trying to do, right? He was trying to drum up interest because he was part of the dinosaur media model, and his ratings were falling dramatically as a result of proliferation of competition.
Yeah.
And so he was also willing to make a lie to boost up his ratings.
Yeah, I really thought that the lying theme ran really deep within the human storyline too, because Patterson or Percy was out there and he was interested in creating a lie, and it was even while it wasn't necessarily a noble lie at the same time, they were even discussing with his partner about we create this lie so that we can generate revenue so that we can save these endangered animals. Even though that wasn't necessarily his goal in the end, they still kind of had a noble lie element to their side as well. And I thought that was kind of interesting that obviously the writers, for the screenplay kind of had this lying theme, but it was almost a different type of lie on both sides.
Yeah, and I'll add one point to that. And this is on the Wikipedia, so I don't know firsthand account of this, but apparently the writers of the film used this lying. It was sparked by the emergence of alternative facts with the Trump administration. Yeah. So this was like a #resist written movie.
Well, if it's on Wikipedia, it can't be a lie.
Can't be wrong.
Well, the other thing that I thought about, kind of getting back to where we were with Robert a minute ago, was Michi asked if all the humans were bad, and I think that there was a good relation to foreign policy here, and I think that they think that we are bad, we think that they're bad, and the different governments kind of keep us hating one another, and when in actuality we're more likely to have things in common. Now, obviously, Robert has the good point about this cryptozoological creature. It'll be different if it was the Yetis and people. But obviously, with what you're saying, it was a little bit more directed at the Yetis are the unknown people. They're the people maybe on the other side of the wall that Trump wants to build, and so they're foreign to us. And so what we got to do is we got to try to tear down these walls and accept everybody as who they are. And I just think that there's a lot of a tribalism in, at least initially, in the Yeti village.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And then also this kind of sparked an idea for me. And this might be a Ron Paul or a Scott Horton point that they make. And that is that the average person in the United States has more in common with the average person in Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, or anywhere else than we have with our own politicians, our own political class.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And we've made that point many times in the sense that what reason do I have to go across, thousands of miles and go fight and kill somebody, if not for some government saying that this is the thing that needs to happen, and this sense of patriotism that we need to all of a sudden hate or go and kill these other people. There's just no reason to.
Right. And then speaking of the sort of resist movement here, or the demonization of, I want to call it straw man of capitalism. Percy is about to lose his house as a result of his poor ratings. Oh, yeah. And so they call him the evil banker man because there was a variable interest rate that apparently Percy was too stupid to understand what that meant. And so he's this helpless victim.
It explains it in the thing of what it's called. It's called a variable interest rate. It varies. What more do you want, Percy?
So there's a little bit
great.
of demonization of that whole concept. I mean, not that the banking structure is really what we would consider a free market system, but he was aware of what the terms were, and he wanted to play the victim card there.
Yeah, for sure.
That's great. I didn't catch that at all. I mean, I heard him say that, but I didn't even think about, that as being, that's good shit.
That's one of the things we do on the show. We'll take one throwaway comment in a movie and expound on it for like 10 minutes.
Well, the other thing that I had in my notes that I thought was kind of interesting, and I think we might have briefly talked on it, but they just arbitrarily write new laws. They just arbitrarily, he comes out and he's, whenever they identify him as being what do they call him, a pygmy red-coated yak or whatever, and he holds it out and he has this red-coated person on there and he sticks the stone right on his, which I don't know why he wears the stones, but, he clicks it right there and puts it on with the stones. So obviously one person can just arbitrarily write any law. And it doesn't necessarily say how the stone keepers, because there are other stone keepers when they go down under the mountain. It's showing some of the other stone keepers and stuff. So it doesn't necessarily describe how this hierarchy is set up, because it doesn't seem like his son or his daughter is in, it doesn't make any reference to them being next in line to be stone keepers. So, it doesn't make any reference to that, but I thought it was kind of interesting how it was, once again, really dictatorial in that they could just arbitrarily write a law and then it just is what it is.
Right.
Yeah,
and it's right away too. It's like whenever they deem it necessary, they just create a new law. And I think there was a direct lineage and that those were stone keepers of the past. And those were like statues in that little, monument area in the cavern. But anyway, Robert, go ahead. You were going to say something.
But I was just going to add on that, it was interesting the way it reminded me of ceremonies of bills being written into law. So they're like, he wrote it on a little, piece of stone or had it written down. And then just as soon as he clicked it onto his shirt and he's like, look, it's in stone. It's on my shirt now. And then everybody was like, oh my God, now it's like real. Now it's, now that he's gone through the act of actually putting it on his shirt. Oh my God. Now it's like, it's like official and shit. And, it's the idea of some politician just making up a law. And then as soon as they write it down, then, it's real. And everybody else has to follow along. It's,
I wonder how many of those were contradictory. Yeah, the theater of the state,
right?
Indeed. I wonder how many of the stones were contradictory to themselves because, I mean, as we're all aware, in the United States, there are hundreds of thousands of laws and regulations, and many of them contradict each other. And so, but in this society, in the Yeti Society, he's got a few hundred stones on him, and every single one of them is not to be questioned, right? They're supposed to be absolute truth. And they even make the point of, well, what if one of them's wrong? And if one of them does not bring all of them into question, which reminds me of some of the line of questioning in the Larkin Rose Candles in the Dark questioning series. Like if this one thing is wrong, then what else might be wrong about it? And I'm just curious, there's really no answer to this, but how many of those stones would contradict with other stones on the same thing? And if that would be enough to awaken these people, or these Yetis.
Nothing would have been able to awaken these people. They believed in mammoths all the way down. And if you had any kind of odd thought that didn't contradicted anything, you just had to push it down.
But yeah, they all do that, right? They all go.
Yeah, just push it down. I had a bad thought. Push it down.
Right. And that reminds me of Stone 15, Ignorance is Bliss.
Yeah.
Mm.
And I actually want to talk about this a little bit because this is a point that, Robert, you and I have discussed ad nauseum.
Yes.
And that is, were you happier before I corrupted your mind?
Yeah, of course I was. Of course I was. But I now think clearly. Whereas before, things didn't quite make sense. You're looking at the political system and it just seems like a mess and a jumble. And, certain people are sort of in favor of this sort of thing and other people are sort of in favor of that sort of thing. And there's people sort of to the left and sort of the right, sort of more conservative, sort of more liberal, but they all seem to kind of converge and do the similar things. And what's the actual principle at play? And there isn't one. And it's really just kind of cleared things up. And, you talk to people and it seems like everybody's got a different sense of morality. And it's just nice to have a really clear set of what you tolerate and what you don't. And if you don't have that foundational awareness of what your principles are, then you could be persuaded to go along with pretty much anything. And that's how government operates.
Well, the other thing that I thought was really interesting about this was that, I think that there's a lot of politicians, a lot of people in public office, a lot of the ruling class, they've been red pilled just as some of us have. But I think that we reach a point, and it's almost like a Star Wars fork in the road at this point. When you get red pilled, you can either be a Stonekeeper or Amigos. You know what I mean? It's you reach this point where you decide you have this knowledge. So do you want to do evil or do you want to do good? And I think that kind of happens for everybody when we reach that point and we see the world for what it is.
Yeah, that actually brings up a good point that we haven't even discussed yet, and that is the conspiracy group.
I have it in my notes.
Right, because in a way, this movie almost, normally in media, calling something conspiracy theory is to discredit it and make it sound fantastical and crazy, and remove any rational discussion about that particular subject. But in this movie, they're basically validating the idea of a conspiracy theory or theorist, a group of people like speculating on what might be happening, and saying, yeah, they were actually correct and they're vindicated in this.
Yeah, they're actually questioning the official narrative, and they're right, as opposed to, yeah, you're right. In every other piece of media, it's, oh, that's just a conspiracy theory. You can ignore that. Or only crazy people talk about that, like Alex Jones.
Well, they even made the movie Conspiracy Theory, where they made what was that, Tom Cruise or whatever, out to be a complete. They kind of gaslighted him in that as well. But with that, with the conspiracy theorists, the other crazy thing that I noticed, and it was just kind of a throwaway line in there as well, is that whenever she's talking about like the Smallfoot flying off the edge, she's writes out, I watched a few times because I wanted to see if it was an actual real formula, but it's just like Yeti speak or something like that. But she writes out a formula in Yetiese for a formula for gravity. Did you guys notice that?
No, I missed it.
Yeah, because she's talking about which direction did he go? Did he go up? Did he go to the, did he fly straight out? And they said, no, he went down. And she said, yeah, she went off and started writing something, said something along the lines of, it makes sense because there's a pole that must take them downward or something like that. And I thought it was just kind of interesting that that these people, including even the Stonekeeper's daughter, are so ignorant to just the world around them because they've been sheltered by the Stonekeeper that they don't even have any, even the Stonekeeper's daughter can't even fathom the idea of gravity.
And only by questioning what they've been told do they actually make any progress. Robert, you still want to live in this society?
Well, I'm just saying, Daniel, it's not the worst thing. If I could move there tomorrow, except for the fact that it's like an anarcho-primitive society, which is not great. I'm not a fan. Like earlier, you pointed out the whole, the problem of stagnating technology in a socialist system. So I'm not happy about that. But, with...
So it's not Galt's Gulch. It's like going to the Amazon and finding a tribe never discovered.
Right. It's not great, but at least you're not being constantly threatened all the time.
Hey, you got a dart in your neck.
Maybe.
Yeah. Well,
Can we talk about one real dumb thing? I just want to mention just the dumb thing in this movie. There's probably other dumb things, but if you're going to design a society and it all depends on the lie being perpetuated, why would you have one of the lies be, we need to ring this gong every morning before sunrise in order to make the sun go across the sky? Well, it's a snail. But as soon as somebody oversleeps, the lie is exposed, or somebody misses the gong, the lie is exposed.
Yeah, that's a pretty risky one.
For the movie, but that is one risky thing if you got to keep this lie perpetuated in this society. I would not have that as one of my lies. Let me just
across generations, right? So many failure points.
Right.
They'll just
every
write
day.
a new stone, man. They'll just write a new stone and then they're good.
Maybe
that's all
they would. Maybe they would, but you're playing with fire. I don't know.
Yeah, well, that's an amazing track record if they didn't have to have already written a new stone to explain that away.
Yeah.
Well, maybe the reason why you want to move there is even the very first song they sing is actually called Perfection. And the whole theme of that song is where Channing Tatum is talking about how perfect of a society in which they live. And this song, especially the second verse, was very socialistic. The lyrics that I had pulled up here is, look at everybody do their part. And they do it with a happy heart, and it gives them all a sense of a greater purpose. Well, that's the way I want it to be. I want to make them all proud of me. Just be a steady Yeti, and deserve this. And it's really like, you have to keep your head down and you have to work for this greater cause and this greater good, kind of like what you were talking about earlier, Dan, not putting, there's no sense of innovation. There's no sense of, of working for yourself or trying to achieve something great. Just keep your head down and be a steady Yeti. And I thought that was kind of interesting.
No, it
Right,
sounds
so-
like living in Pol Pot's Cambodia. Or
Yeah, you finally
on a farm.
achieved the noble new socialist Yeti.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what it sounds like. These guys have been totally conditioned. They are the new socialist Yeti. Absolutely right, Dave.
Oh, that's great.
All right. Well, we're getting a little long in the winter here on the show, so we usually start winding into the final summary and review, where we give a rating 1 through 10, and we go a decimal point deep. But if we have any other final points before we get into that, say them now, speak them now, or forever hold your peace.
I have gone through all of my notes. I don't have anything really of significance.
All right, Rocky, anything on your side?
The only other thing that that I really had that I think is noteworthy is I think that the miscommunication between Migos and Patterson was pretty interesting, because they're trying to convey these ideas back and forth to one another, and even the idea of roasting him to warming him up, I think was just pretty interesting. I think it kind of harkens to the idea of messaging. And as libertarians or ANCAPs, I think that we get lost in the way that we present messages to other people. A lot of times people are, ANCAPs and libertarians can be very condescending, almost like we know better than other people. And
But we
can turn
do.
a lot of- well, and
But we
turn
can
a
be
lot-
autistic about it. It's true.
and it's important to be able to message properly, because even though we think that we're getting something across the right way, we might think that we're trying to warm somebody up, and in all actuality, they think we're trying to roast them. So I think that's a really important thing to take away.
You're right. Yeah. And I think that the movie did a very fine job of showing that from the different perspectives of the characters, because when Migo's perspective was presented, he was having a conversation, trying to, come in peace. But from Percy's perspective, is like this giant monster is yelling and growling at him, threatening him.
Yeah.
And yeah, they showed a lot of that from the other's perspective. And I thought that was really, really well done, really well conveyed. All right. I have one more thing before we get into final summaries and reviews here. And that was the famous Rahm Emanuel "never let a crisis go to waste" idea, which was sort of the impetus for the entire facade of the intellectual and religious cover for the mysticism and hiding this society from the ravages of the savages of the humans. But there was a point where somebody cried out, "We're sinking. We need to do something." And that sounded a lot to me like the climate alarmism, and a reason to get everyone agitated and seeking a solution from government or from an authority figure, because it's a problem that's too big for the individual. And so it must be a top-down solution.
I don't remember this. What point in the movie was that?
This is very near the end, and I think that it might have been maybe when the clouds went away or something like that. It was a throwaway line, and I'm trying to make something out of it. But
Well, no, I mean, you got people that are indoctrinated and to always looking to an authority figure. I remember back in the day, I think I was probably like 10 or 11. I think I asked my father, Dad, why do we have these people that, make laws and rule over us and stuff? I don't know if I was a really like ANCAP kid or whatever, but I was just kind of curious about why is the world set up this way? Like, what is this? And I remember his answer was, well, you need to, have division of labor. He didn't say it in these words, but he said, you need to have people whose job it is to do that thing. Like, this is a job that needs to be done. And so you designate people to do that. And I think that's what most people believe. And most people believe that these people are doing necessary labor, and you want to get something as a return for your money. So when something like this happens that is big, you generally knee-jerk reaction go to, well, that's something for government to handle. And I think that's what the majority of human beings think.
Well, I remember our, late afternoon basketball sessions where we were solving the problems of the world. And most of our solutions were, well, the government ought to do X about Y. And that was like how we were, educated in the school system. Like that's where you first look to solve problems.
Well, and you're already paying for them, right? And you want to get a return on your investment. You want to get something out of it. You don't want to just be throwing money in a hole. So you want them to do something. And you think that government actually does anything positive. And that's the difference between, I think, us and everybody else is we recognize what government actually does. It's the big problem of the seen versus the unseen.
Well, a lot of it comes into play when we think the government has some sort of power like just automatically incorporated into it. That, we lose the fact that government only has the amount of power that we as individuals give to them. I mean, a lot of times when people are talking to me and I start ranting and raving about the government or about problems, people go, well, what do we do about it? And I, typically tell them, there's not much you can do until enough people are fed up in order to no longer voluntarily surrender that power to the government, because the government has no power in which what we give to them. So what I'm getting at is that we consciously think or have it ingrained into us through school that the government has some sort of power to fix problems, has some sort of power to do this stuff. And so initially what we think is, hey, there's this problem, government should fix it. But in all actuality, government doesn't have the problem to do anything other than steal money from people and create regulation.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And Robert, I think I sent you a Larkin Rose video that ties right into this, where he was talking about the idea of, even being principled, you still need to sort of sacrifice some of your own individual freedom in the effort of self-preservation. And until enough people are aware and are able to resist and feel like there's enough others willing to resist as well, to where the state wouldn't have enough resources to prevent it, you sort of have to maintain your own survival, your own minimizing the amount of intrusion in your own life.
Well, isn't that the whole idea of nullification?
He was talking about people being so principled to anarchist philosophy that they won't even get driver's license or pay any taxes or, get a concealed carry permit, things like that. And I'll agree that that is a very principled stance, but it's also a stance that's going to get you a lot of friction with the state and a lot of repercussions that unfortunately are a reality. And I would prefer, until such point to where they won't impact you by not doing them, that you sort of have to pick your battles,
What I'm saying is that isn't that the idea of nullification? Everybody just stops obeying this one law, and there's nothing that anybody can do about it because they can't throw everybody in a rape cage. I mean, that's the kind of the idea of nullification, at least nullifying a law, correct?
Yeah. I guess in a sense, it'd be like an agorist nullification. When I hear the term nullification, I think in the Tom Woodsian sense of a state nullifying a federal law, more in the technical, political science aspect. But yeah, I get what you're saying.
Yeah, I didn't see that video, but it looked like the thumbnail of a recent video I did watch from Larkin, where he's talking about where, being nice to statists and not, treating them with scorn, where, I tend to agree with him. There's room for both, like he says. He says there's room for both, where you're, kind of like an olive branch persona. But there's also room, I think, for treating their ideas as they should be treated. Like, you are advocating for a raised gun, for the enslavement of humanity, for the violent subjugation of humanity. You are advocating for that. So I have no reason to, even entertain your silly ideas. And I should treat them with absolute scorn like they deserve.
Yeah, cut them off with the moral knee.
Well, yeah. And so you're kind of shaming them, right? I mean, maybe it'll help, maybe it will work, maybe it won't. But I don't think you're necessarily under any obligation to treat every adult with kid gloves and treat them all with, Mr. Nice Guy. And hey, your ideas are equally valid. Man, violent subjugation of humanity, that's equally valid as being peaceful. No, it isn't.
It's a marketplace of ideas. If you want to get your ideas out there and implemented, maybe you start a petition or run for office yourself.
Well, I don't remember who said it, but I remember somebody on a show I was listening to was talking about how in a libertarian society you could have you could have a socialist commune. If it really works out well and you want to do it, you're free to go out and try it. However, in a socialist community, in a socialist world, you could not have a libertarian commune, and I think that is a stark difference between just moral principles. I think it's so cut and dry on who has the moral ground in that argument.
100% correct.
Circle gets the square. Well, let's get into our final summary and review. Robert, you want to show Rocky how it's done? That can be his turn.
Oh yeah, I'm always the guinea pig on this show. So The Smallest Defeat. I would absolutely recommend this film. I would recommend it for people of all ages. I thought it was well done, well acted, well voice acted. No part of the story seemed outrageously outlandish. I mean, other than the premise, but you got to accept, this crazy world. But I don't think the movie contradicts itself. It doesn't break its own rules. And the story unfolded in a very interesting way. And it struck me by how adult and how, it had actually had a real kind of a claim and a statement to make. So I was pleasantly surprised, question authority and question, reality. And when what you see, what your individual experience trumps what, some authority figure says. And it's really an individual argument. It's a championing of the individual in this movie. And I'm always a champion of the individual, the most minority of minorities. And so, yeah, I'm going to give this movie a strong 8.1. Highly recommended. It's not like my greatest movies of all time. I don't know if it'll crack the top 10 of the year, but strong film. Check it out. Highly recommended.
Yeah, a lot of times whenever I'm watching a movie, and I usually applicate this to horror movies on whether or not if it was actually scary, but I try to look at a movie if at the reality aspect. And I mean, granted, they're Yetis, so they're not real. But once again, we kind of talked about, reaching across borders and kind of melding different people, who's the outsider and who's not. And it kind of gave that look back and forth. And so, I mean, application of the real world, I really thought that it nailed that down. The other thing that I usually look for in movies, I try to find out if there's any real big plot holes, something that just will totally dismantle the core story. And I didn't really see anything like that in there. The other thing that I did really like is Migos, whenever he was questioned about what he saw, he did stand his ground. They said, well, if you're saying the stone is wrong, are you saying the stone is wrong? And he said, well, if saying that I saw a Smallfoot says that the stone is wrong, then yeah, I guess that's what I'm saying. And then that's the point where he gets banished. And I think that little scene right there is probably one of the most powerful scenes in the whole movie, because it's the point where one man stands up against the state, and it's that almost that David Goliath kind of contrast. And so I really liked it. Also, another thing is that, I try to look and see if it's something that I like my kids to watch. It's not mindless. There's a good point to it. I'm probably right there at about an 8 as well. I think this was a pretty good kids movie, and you don't get a lot of those nowadays.
All right. Well, two big fans of anarcho-primitive Yeti society here. I'm going to say that I also enjoyed this movie. And Robert, when we talked about doing this movie, you wanted to know what my kids thought of it. And I didn't get a numerical value out of them, but they did enjoy it. And in fact, they wanted to watch it again before I recorded this episode, but we ran out of time due to some behavioral issues on their part. And anyway, they're all right. They're fun. But I thought that this was really well done. I don't know much about Channing Tatum. I've heard the name before. I'm not even sure what he looks like, but I think that he did fine with the voice acting. Danny DeVito was, of course, great. I will want to discuss the merits of LeBron James at some point with you versus Michael Jordan, Robert, in the acting realm.
Anytime
is talking time. But yeah, overall, it's a really well done film. I'm going to go with a 7.5 on this, and I do recommend that people do check it out. It does have a little bit of a stank to it from the writers thinking that it's a slight against Trump or the right or something like that. So that does stick in my craw a little bit. But I do like the idea of questioning authority, but just not with their authority that they're pushing in their media and their messaging here. I think that you do need to think for yourself and believe your own eyes and use logic and reason to and have principles, right? And then apply the logic and reason from those principles, and then you'll see the world in a whole new way. So that, I think, is our time for the show. The Last Nighters episode, 55? So you can find the show notes and more at lastnighters.com/55. Our guest has been Rocky Ferrenburg, and you can find his work, including his podcast, the Noisemaker Podcast, all linked from his website at rockyferrenburg.com, which will be also listed on the show notes page down below the video and all of that stuff. Any final comments before we say goodnight, everyone?
Thanks for listening to another episode of The Last Nighters. It's been my pleasure hosting you. Come back next week. What are we going to be talking about next week, Daniel?
I don't even know. I think that we were going to try to wrangle an old guest to come back and do Collateral or Salt, the Angelina Jolie or the Tom Cruise movie.
We also got Starship Troopers coming up soon, don't we?
Yeah, that's just waiting on whenever you're ready after you've done the old audiobook.
Yeah, I was going to do the audiobook. I don't know if I'm going to do it now. Maybe. Could definitely do the movie, of course, but I don't know.
All right, well, let's go with Collateral and see if we can get the guest, and if not, we'll just do it anyway, because it is a fun movie. We get Tom Cruise back on the show, Jamie Foxx. It'll be fun. There's a good argument in that one.
I remember it being a good movie. I don't remember the argument, but I'm down to watch it.
All right, Collateral next week on The Last Nighters. Rocky, thank you for joining us for The Last Nighters episode 55. You've been a great guest.
No problem. Thank you guys for having me. Much appreciated.
Good night from last night. All right, continuing on the Actual Anarchy podcast for a few minutes. We might do some Kathleen Turner Overdrive after this for our Patreon supporters. You can support us at actualanarchy.com/Patreon. And the future is now. At the end of the last Night's portion, I said, Robert, let's have that discussion. And much like we had the MJ versus LeBron discussion at the end of Death Wish episode.
What do you got, Daniel?
Let's talk about this. So Space Jam is, of course, the most famous Michael Jordan movie. And I think he was in a few more.
Was he?
They're two, animated features, right?
Yeah.
I remember watching Space Jam when I was a kid and enjoying it. However,
that is not a movie that has aged well, I don't think.
No, I watched it like 2 years ago again when it was like on Amazon Prime. You know, it was like included in the free viewing. And yeah, it's awful. It is an awful movie.
I believe it. Kind of, they were doing the whole Who Framed Roger Rabbit thing, right? But not nearly as well.
Right. And then I from what I understand, prior to that, Jordan's theatrical experience was Hanes commercials, underwear commercials.
Yeah.
With the Hitler stash, right? That was whenever he had the Hitler stash, right?
Yeah. I mean, he was winning championships around that period of time. But and I still consider him the greatest of all time, though LeBron's not done in.
But LeBron has surpassed him in acting ability.
Well, so LeBron, you said he was in some Amy Schumer movie, right?
Yeah, and some SNL alum guy. I want to say it was some kind of a dating romantic comedy type movie.
Okay, well, it's a movie I've never seen and never will see. So let's just talk about the animated versions here. So Space Jam versus the Smallfoot.
Not even close. Smallfoot by a mile, by a country mile. Come on.
And even specifically,
hold on. I got a question here though, because LeBron played an actual animated character, but Michael Jordan played himself. And so Michael Jordan he played in a partially animated movie, but he wasn't an animated character. So is it a fair contrast at that point?
That is a good question. Yeah, I got to give the nod to LeBron. I mean, he hasn't. I mean, you watched Space Jam, right?
Oh, yeah.
Right, Daniel? Was he like stiff and wooden and barely, himself, like craptacular acting? Come on, be honest.
It was pretty bad, yeah. I mean, it wasn't like Shazam bad, like Shaq bad.
Oh, yeah.
Was he reading off cue cards the whole time?
Oh, shit.
Probably, yeah. And I think this is before those like glass angled speech monitor things.
Yeah.
This is old school. It's probably written on cue cards and Sharpie.
And Jordan has not, continued his acting career. Whereas I think LeBron, once he's done playing basketball, he's probably going to continue to get acting roles. I'm guessing. But Jordan, after he was done that, a little bit of acting, and then he did the commercials, and now he's pretty much just disappeared into, well, I mean, he's still probably active in the NBA somehow, like with the Wizards or whatever. But
the Bobcats, I think he's in Charlotte. I think he's a partial owner or president or something.
Okay, but nobody's knocking on his door to be in some movie. That is just not happening. I mean, I know LeBron's got a high stature. A lot of people still watch him. He's a big personality. He's not very intelligent in terms of economics, but few people are. It's fine.
Yeah, and he is in LA now.
Yeah.
So yeah, I expect to see.
He'll probably be doing a whole bunch more movies.
Yeah. Well, I'll agree. I will tend towards LeBron being the GOAT of the NBA.
Well, he's above Shaq
film.
and Jordan. Come on, Shaq isn't even. It's like,
the real question is Ray Allen as Jesus Shuttlesworth.
And he got game, right?
Yeah. I think that's the gold standard as far as NBA players in
But again, he's playing a basketball player. But yeah, no, you're right.
Well, let's be honest. Jordan was playing a basketball player, not just any basketball player. Jordan was playing himself, and so far he's right above Shaq in that. So they're kind of at a tie for last place. So just because a basketball player plays a basketball player doesn't mean that they're going to do the best job. That's kind of like saying Scarlett Johansson can't play a transgender because she's not a transgender.
Mm.
Yeah, you don't know her experience or your experience. All right. Well, I think we're probably at a good point where we can get into some Kathleen Turner Overdrive and let our hair down even more. So this has been episode, 112 of the show. So you can find the show notes more at actualanarchy.com/112. Our guest has been Rocky Ferrenburg, and you've been a lot of fun. Thank you very much for recommending the Smallfoot and joining us for this discussion. And
thank you guys for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Let's get into that Kathleen Turner Overdrive, shall we?
chipmunks. CHIPMUNK. We're the chipmunks. Guaranteed to brighten your day. Do 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 do.